Right, so as we discussed in the previous video about economics, yeah, and definitely check that out on the channel. So in that we spoke about GDP, amongst other things, of course. But when we talk about GDP, if we're talking about debt in relation to GDP, the total amount of government debt that the UK government has is the equivalent of 87% of GDP. Okay? That is a significant amount. In America, the US government has a national debt of 108%. So the US government has got more debt than the entire it's the equivalent, is more than their entire economy is worth. That's how much debt they are in. Never mind all the other countries in Europe and in Japan. Japan, before all this, had over 200% of the GDP in government debt, and this is pretty much the picture across most of the Western world. You've got very, very high levels of government debt. This is the most debt that we've had since a little bit after World War II, and that's as a result of World War II. Obviously, we needed huge amounts of government spending in the war effort, and it took decades to pay that debt down. So we're in a situation now that we haven't been in most of our lifetime, okay? This is huge. Never mind what we're also going to be talking about. So we've got government debt, we've got consumer debt, and then we've got corporate debt. So consumer debt in the UK, it's at 87%. In the US, it's at 76%. Okay? So that means that, you know, people maxing out on a credit card. That means people spending on all manner of things. Like buying Gucci bags and Louis Vuittons and all that kind of stuff, right? And it's people are essentially living well beyond their means. They're not saving much, and they're running up a huge amount of credit on things. Now, some of that is necessary, of course. Like, you know, if people lose their jobs and they need a little bit of extra money, if people, you know, are taking out mortgages on their homes, then some consumer debt is necessary. But it's a situation where at this level, it's becoming unsustainable. Never mind again what the effect of lockdown may have been on that. And then finally, we're going to have to talk about corporate debt in the UK and the US, right? So in the UK, corporate debt is at 84%, and in the US, it's at 75%. And all these figures, by the way, just a reminder, this is before the current crisis that we're facing right now. So before COVID, yeah, this is the effect of, this is where we were at already. Okay, this is 10 years after the last recession. Sorry, more than 10 years after the last recession, and yet this is some of the struggles that we were facing anyway. And the news doesn't talk about it, but this is a huge issue underlying lots of different things. Okay, and it could get very serious very quickly, and no one's really paying attention to it. Right, so if we add up those three figures, yeah, we're talking about government debt, consumer debt, and corporate debt in the US and the UK, we find a grand total of 258% for the UK and 259% for the US. This level of debt is insane. This level of debt cannot be paid down in any short amount of time. This is something that will take a generation or two to pay down, right? And do you see anything from any of our politicians trying to pay it down? On top of that, you know, we know that for the UK, government debt has gone up to almost 100% of GDP because of the bailouts for the coronavirus. Yeah, so that's an extra £300 billion. Yeah, taking our national debt in the UK to 2 trillion. That's a 2 with 12 zeros after it, okay? For those of you who like are struggling to think what 2 trillion actually looks like. So that's the current thing that we're at the moment. Never mind the US, which put hundreds of billions of pounds into their bailout, and it's insane. Like no one is really looking at this, because debt is something which tends to hit people over time, and it's not something that is really scary and really blah blah blah, but it's at any point it can be. And before we get into all that, we're gonna have to like and subscribe. Yes, you're enjoying the video. Yeah, I know you're watching still. Yeah, like and subscribe. Okay, comment in there, say what a great video this is, or rah, this is boring, or da 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 da. No, actually, no, don't say it's boring, because obviously it's not boring. And if it is boring, well then you small brain. So get big brain like me.
But Kwame, though, I don't understand. I mean, interest rates are at a record low rate. Like, what's the problem? Like, I mean, it's at 0.1% in the UK and 0.25 in the US. Like, come on, man, take a chill pill. Like, what the hell?
Now, to whoever that was gonna be, yeah, a lot of people have this weird thing that interest rates are really low, and therefore we should just chill and just like make the most of it. Yeah, this is what really typifies short-term thinking, right? Because interest rates are at historic lows now, and Bank of England, and the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve in the US, and all the other central banks, because they're even floating the idea of negative interest rates, right? So instead of you having to, it'd be like the equivalent of if you had money in the bank, instead of the bank giving you interest, you're having to pay the bank for the privilege of that, right? So if they start going down the road of negative interest, it's a thing of our debtors would somehow owe us rather than us owing our debtors, or something like that. Before this crisis, negative interest rates weren't even considered a thing. They were seen as like some theoretical nonsense, yeah. But yeah, essentially, the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve have both floated those ideas. So, but the thing is, if it goes back to historic averages, then we're in a massive problem, right? The interest rate average for the UK alone, for the Bank of England interest rate over time, the average is about 5%. So it's at 0.1% now. But if it jumps up to 5%, we've got problems. Yeah, that's what? Do the maths? That's a 50% increase, right? So that would mean us going from paying 2 billion to 100 billion, right? Never mind if it goes to historic average, there's historic highs in this country of 17%, then we'd be paying £340 billion a year just on paying down the debt. That's insane. And that's not all the other debts we talk about. I just talk about government debt. That is how much taxpayers, this is how much our government would have to pay if it went back to historic average or to historic highs. Just because it's low at the moment does not mean that it's going to stay like that. Even if it jumps up to 2%, we have a problem. If it jumps up to 5%, we've got an even bigger problem. If it jumps up even higher than that, hey, I don't know what happens then. It's and the same in the US. Yeah, it's 0.25 now, but historically the highs of the Federal Reserve interest rate went all the way up to 20%. So you do the maths on that. That's a huge interest, right? That's a huge increase. That's a 80. It's increased at that point 80-fold, right? So don't just think that, oh, it's fine at the moment, because at any point interest rates could rise and then we are stuck.